Welcome to a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms new dawn today. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're unpanned. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Welcome to the Weekly Legacy. I am the legacy of Jennifer Kaiser. Would you die like the apostles? Because you might have to, for what we're about to get into today. Let's start the show. Is Islam a heresy?
I don't know. Is it?
I think it is. Honestly, I think it's one of the biggest heresies, and all of monotheism is a Christian heresy. I think it more so correlates with or coordinates with Christianity than anything. I honestly think that it is the heresy of heresies. Welcome into the show, everybody. I'm Zachary Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph, who actually doxed himself last week, if you can remember.
I don't remember anything. What are you talking about? I got PTSD.
Yeah, you got PTSD from all the fornicating that you're doing behind the scenes. Yeah. Every time you go pee, we know what you're really doing. You're touching yourself.
God help us all.
Yeah, you gotta touch yourself to pee. Well, I guess theoretically you couldn't. No, let's not dive into jokes. How are you doing this week there, Andrew? Well, how's your week been?
Brought to you by ZeroChan, the decentralized BitTorrent enabled 4chan clone.
Is that
I'm doing pretty good.
You're doing? Are you an AI? Do you not compute?
I'm trying. That's why it says AI Coney, right?
But I got a video. We're actually gonna watch it together. We're gonna dissertate it together. We're gonna try to
forever.
Yeah, we're gonna try to figure out what is he exactly saying. I think it's very concise in the research. Quite frankly,
it's a concise guide to economics.
Yeah, it's pretty concise as economics would be, especially with Ludwig von Mises, the king of them all. The king, the if howdy, William. So welcome in everybody. Welcome, William. Everybody who's tuning in at this moment, like, share, get this out there. But honestly, if you don't want to, I wouldn't blame you because we're probably going to go down rabbit holes that might get us marked for holy jihad.
Well, I guess that
Not
means
gonna
I'm
lie.
marking out. See ya.
No, you're get your butt back in here. You're going down with me. We're- um,
I'm not going down. Not
you're
without a
going
fight.
down with me. Yeah. So, well, you turn the other cheek, man. You gotta love your enemies, but at the same time, in order to love your enemies, you gotta be able to call your enemies out. And for the most part, I'm not saying that Islam is my enemy. Perhaps maybe they are right. I don't know. But in accordance to this guy's research and how concise it is, and what my personal belief is when it comes to the Holy Quran and what's in it and Islam as a faith, I don't foresee it being truthful. I think it's a lie. And I don't think
Mhm.
Allah is actually my God. I don't think Allah in Arabic is God. Sure. And I know when it comes to like Christian Arabs, they speak Arabic, they refer to God as Allah. Obviously, it's obvious you speak your language, right? But I will say one thing about like in terms of just taking it Christianity versus Islam, right? I can pray in any direction that I feel I want to pray to because God
Okay.
is everywhere. God encompasses the entirety of the universe and and the earth and everywhere. Anywhere and everywhere God is with me. Islam, uh you pray 5 times a day eastward towards Mecca. Why is that?
Sounds like an idol
Howdy,
worship
Mark.
to me.
Sounds a lot like idol worship, actually. Um, another point that another point that I'm confused with is the general concept of violent action that the Quran speaks of, whereas my Lord speaks of kindness and of love and to turn the other cheek. Obviously, we're human beings, so we're not going to be. I'm not, by all means, because I'm a human and I'm corruptible and I am a sinner. It's very hard for me to not be judgmental. Uh, but I try to walk the footsteps of Jesus as much as I possibly can. They either convert you or they kill you.
I've heard.
That's just the history of Islam. So that's just history and period. I mean, period. Islam is colonialism, and yes, I get it. Colonialism, Western colonialism is very difficult to understand as well, and because we innovated. Yes, I get it. Colonialism takes you take one you conquer one culture and force them into taking up your culture, but I will say that if it wasn't for Western colonialism, we probably don't see the world innovating to a higher standard. Capitalism, baby. I mean, I'm not a capitalist, but I do like markets. But Islam is colonialist in its own right. So you cannot deny the fact that even nowadays, I mean, you have to dress as Muslims dress. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to pray towards the east, Mecca, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you have to adapt to their culture. You can't just have faith in the Lord. You can't. Yeah, you have to actually be implemented into their culture, or you are an apostate.
Interesting.
You guys need to look into post-labor economic theory. Fascinating. We need to decipher that. We will definitely have to. That is a great idea. Timely given AI and robotic advancements. William is going through it. Aren't all religions colonial? To a certain extent, yes. When you get politics involved, um, which, in my opinion, religion and its organizational structure is always destined to be political. Spirituality, faith is not religion, in my opinion. Um, we need to divorce from that idea. We need to evolve from the tribalism for which we are naturally inclined to be, which is very hard because tribalism or the nations is a very historical reference. I mean, I would just say go into the Old Testament and read Judges. I mean, the idea of the nation and the state are far different from what we consider a nation state today. So they all have rituals. We do.
Well, we're
Uh,
popular today.
yeah. Given Christians give the Lord a full day. Preaching religions are, I don't know where Mark was going on that one. Judaism is not a preaching religion. That's actually true.
Let me ask
They
you
don't
an
preach.
Enneagram question. So 3-6, right? Control performer,
Hmm.
middle manager. How do
Hmm.
we identify the difference between, a government, a religion, who's a middle manager of philosophy versus something else?
How do we what?
Like,
Say that again.
the routine or the practices, the perspective would be identified with the middle management technique, where they're just sitting there doing a controlled burn and trying to
Mm,
buy time,
you
like we
mean
see all throughout the Middle East right now.
like the Middle East right now, or you could
Yeah.
say the dark ages and the high Middle Ages of Europe, et cetera, et cetera. It's like a managing firm. You have a centerpiece that holds it all together, and then you have little factions or kingdoms, or whatever you call it in Islam nowadays in the modern era. Um, but you have your little um, your
Territories.
divisions, your divisional territories for the corporation, right? You know how corporations go elsewhere, they regional territories for the corporation. So yeah, I can certainly see that. You get your dictation the from the headquarters, and then it comes down to middle management within the regions, and then they kind of run their business from the region. And it's like playing telephone as well, if you think about it, because your dictation's coming from headquarters, but but it all gets lost in translation over the phone when you're playing telephone. So then each region might be preaching, or in this case, religion as a corporation, but each region might be running the business a little differently than what headquarters wants the entirety of the business all across the global market to actually run as. And so could it be efficient? Sure. But is it efficient? No, because you're kind of losing touch to that centerpiece of what the business in itself wants to run itself as.
Okay.
So there is a loss in translation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That could be in terms towards Islam, that could be in terms towards Christianity, that can be well, I don't think that's really anything to do with Judaism, because I think Judaism is a
Well,
different
look what
breed.
happened.
Mm.
Look what happened right now in Palestine. I mean, that's kind of middle management kind of environment, right? They're just
Well, I I think Palestine, I'll let you finish your piece, actually. I think Palestine, Israel, that has a lot more to do with a political implication. I don't think that has more to do, I think that's more politics than it is religious, in like a faith stance. because I don't
Yeah.
think either side really actually believes in anything. They just believe in murdering each other,
Power.
whether it's
Yeah.
power. And that's where religion, in my opinion, gets embroidered into the political sphere of power and influence, and you lose touch of faith because human beings are corruptible.
I just asked because like it seems no matter where you go, there's always some kind of like prison population associated with these concepts. And so, I mean, we was listening to that podcast that book the other day, right? And
hmm
he's talking about how they're always saying, "Oh, we won against Israel," but it doesn't matter. They look over each other and say, "Well, I'm better than you, and I'm gonna I'm gonna dominate you and control you," and then no, I'm gonna dominate and control you. So that's why I just kind of just thinking,
It's a death cult. He's
yeah.
right. He's right in the title of that book. It is a death cult. Well, I mean, whenever you're trying to establish some sort of faithfulness, but corresponding there's something that's supposed to be personal, as Mark says, faith is personal, in my opinion. When you're trying to establish what is supposed to be a personal connection to your deity or to your spirituality, but on a collective standard, um, it gets muddled down towards a hierarchy, um, a man-made hierarchy for which corruption instills. So Christianity is at that issue. Islam, I think, is actually designed for that issue. Christianity has that issue because we're all human, and human beings are naturally pack predator, pack prey, and we prey on the weakest of the weak in humanity. We prey upon ourselves. That's what makes humanity disgusting. In my opinion, we lose touch in what life really should be all about and what the purpose of it is, and we corrupt into this idea that we need to control other men.
I mean, that's what
Can you?
social order is, right? It's
Mm,
an efficient attempt at efficiently controlling the narrative to be productive and successful in the long term.
hmm Can you explain why religion and institution is followed by people who loathe institution? Andrew, can you explain that?
Well, you know,
As libertarians,
as libertarians, yes.
as is what he is what he added. But can you explain? hmm So we'll keep the question
Well,
up there. Can you explain
yeah.
why religion and institution is followed by people who loathe institutions?
Well, I mean, that is in the context of the Enneagram, this type 6 is reduce risk. And so as a reflection of that is that they're blindly loyal for a time unless they feel like something's wrong. So that's a short answer, but I'm sure, if you had more questions, I could try to flesh it out a little more.
Well, he says his concern was never the faith, but the religion. So I guess to kind of expand on that, why is it that like talking on the perspective of libertarianism, why is it that you reject one instance of an institution, say the state, but gravitate towards another institution, say Rome, as if you were
Well,
like a Catholic libertarian?
it really depends on your motivations, right? Your actions. If you want
Mm.
control, you're going to go and try to control what you can as a human being. If you're trying to be, like more neutral, you're going to try to keep the peace, and then if you want to be more religiously fervent, I'm sure you're going to try to reform.
So it's all about reform. We're all reformers at
That's
heart.
what we'd like to be. I think that's why
Mm.
we're libertarians, is because we want to stake our claim and prove that our models work.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
I don't know.
I'm not a real libertarian, dog. I'm not a
Okay, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I there's too much libertinism, too much history that coincides back to what libertarianism branches off of itself in reality. I mean, the first used by literal socialists in France in the mid 19th century, and the libertine proto-socialism of the French Revolution in the 18th century. Libertinism is not freedom. It's literally just individual irresponsibility towards an immoral cause for doing whatever you damn well please, capturing your desires, your sick, twisted desires with no consequence at all. If you want to rape, you can rape. If you want to have sex with a minor, you can have sex with a minor. That these are sick, disgusting ideas, and I think we need to redefine libertarianism if we're going to use that word to mean liberty.
Welcome to Islam.
Welcome to Islam. My answer is the threat of loss of an afterlife. They bow to these institutions.
That's fair.
The fear of not knowing the unknown gets people to gravitate towards the material world of institutional hierarchies.
I mean, that kind of plays in line with type 6 is that trade in secrets, right? But they're driven by fear. They're scared of everything. They hate weird things.
So, shall we dive into the video? Should we dive into this video and talk about it since you gravitated towards Islam?
Is this a weird podcast?
We're pretty weird.
Okay.
We are pretty weird. Let's dive in. Let's dive in. So we fear death, defined as no afterlife or eternal hell. I think that's spot on right there. The fear of death, and honestly, there's nothing to fear, everybody. That's why we should have faith, because we don't know. We really do not know. I would much rather have faith that there is an afterlife and not fear death. And then when the time comes where I'm dead and gone, if the atheists are right, how am I to know that they're right? How do they know that they're right? There's nothing. I'm in the ground. So you're either right. Yeah. So
a lot of people in Japan get cremated all the time.
Cremated in the ground. I mean, whatever. I mean, you're going back to the earth in some capacity. So the contradiction I observe is that many are anti-establishment but look to the church, one of the oldest establishments. Personal faith is amazing. Pascal's wager. That's interesting concept right there. Adding that, you're grabbing a hold of one idea in divorce of another to kind of establish where you stand in life, like what is right. And we're trying to search for truth. That's the whole journey and the purpose of life, is we are trying to search for an objective truth. The problem is we may never find that objective truth, because
I have a question when you're done. Just when you're done. Sorry, please.
The only thing I was going to add is we're all human individuals that have our own psyche and our own ways of thinking, that we come across various perspectives. Now we have an inkling of that objective truth within our own subjective truths, but we're always going along the lines of what we're so impressionable. Let's just put it that way. So we're going along the lines of what we hear, what we see, what we observe. And so it gets muddled down to where our truth ends up being fulfilled through others' truths. And then that's how you get organizational structures of hierarchical religions and politics, in my opinion.
Just my question real quick, and I'm not trying to make it political. I'm just trying to ask a question. We know about paleo libertarianism, right? Is there a paleo Christianity? Like
a paleo,
like in the same vein as paleo libertarian theory? Is there a perspective of religion in that vein?
Well, why don't you explain what paleo libertarianism is, Andrew, and then correspond with that?
paleo-libertarians is the very bare basics of libertarian. It's not no ethical positive and no legal positivism, just brass tacks.
You're to the point, and that's it. It's literally straight to the point.
It's the very bare basics. There's no fluff or show. There's no theory outside of just you have rights and you act on it. Natural
I
law,
think,
negative rights.
I mean, if I were to go on to that, I would say the true church in its form, if they were, excuse me, the true church, and I'm a Catholic, so I'm going to say the Catholicism, muddled through its corruption because of man, because institutionals are founded by men and men are corrupt. But I think that when it comes down to that point of paleo Christian concepts, I would actually inquire that it would be more aligned with the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox schism. I think it goes back to the foundations of what the Orthodox and the Catholics actually believe what the faith should be structured as, and where its foundations are. The Reformation, while probably a good thing in its decentralization, I think we've lost a lot from where we actually stand, because I think it just causes another fight between what is the right following of the teachings of Christ, right? So we get muddled in like, oh, well, I'm a Lutheran, so this is what we should do, or I'm a Baptist, or I'm a Catholic, or I'm an
Well, see,
Orthodox, I'm Orthodox,
that's what I always
etc.
thought is
But
that there's these branched or forked
mhm,
interpretations of Christianity, right?
yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah,
talking about. Is that we get back to, I guess, Eastern Orthodox is probably something I'll probably eventually look into, just
yeah. But
to consider.
if I were to actually say that, judging by how the schism is in history and what the Orthodoxy believes in, they actually believe it. They don't believe that there should be any form of iconography. They perceive that that's idolatry, even though it's really just imagery of what you perceive uh, Christ as, or the Mother Mary, or et cetera, et cetera. So if I were to say what is a foundation, I'm still going to say that you still have that schism, left-right schism, haha, hee hee, east-west, between Rome and Constantinople. So Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church. But I do think I would probably lean more towards that paleo Christian concept that you're referring to be more orthodox. I think that their concept of it is they're more they perceive that they're more in line with the foundations of where Christianity uh, grows from, which is a
The roots.
Which is Judaism, the ruins of Judaism, and they still understand that concept. I would actually go even further and go further south into Africa and say that the Paleo Christians are the Ethiopian Orthodoxy, the Ethiopian Church.
Okay. Well, I know, in Lacanian psychoanalysis, there's a concept called jouissance, and I remember when I
hmm
was researching it, there was an Eastern Orthodox Christian channel that was talking about it. So maybe we can look that over eventually on the podcast and just check it out.
I mean, as a Roman Catholic myself, I am absolutely fascinated with the Eastern Orthodox Church. I honestly do think it is a beautiful thing, and I think, in my opinion, I think it's time for us to reunify, come back together. But I think the Eastern Orthodox is beautiful. So there's a priest or a bishop from the Orthodox that I actually will watch certain sermons of his, homilies, whatever you want to refer to it. Forget his name, but he's beautiful sermons. Yeah, and I'm a Catholic, so let's reunify Constantinople, Istanbul. Greece now. I guess Istanbul's been taken over by the Muslims, the secular Turkish Muslims, but still. But let's reunite. So, but I
Dan,
do
Catholic
think that.
libertarians, you ruined Catholic libertarianism.
So, but with that, the task at hand,
All right.
let's jump into it. Let's see what Islam might possibly be really about.
What am I going to do? I'm going to look at 4 areas. I'm going to look at the problem with the sources. Then I'm going to hit Mecca, go from there to Muhammad, and then from there to the Quran. We're going to end with the Quran because it's by far the most damaging material. Much of what I'm going to be introducing tonight, most of you have never seen before. And if you have, well, great, God bless you, because then you'll probably understand a little bit. But most of you, this will be new. What are the claims that the Muslims make concerning the standard Islamic narrative, S-I-N? Isn't that great? Sin? We're going to shut down sin tonight. The standard Islamic narrative are their traditions. This is what every Muslim needs to know. Though every Muslim, whether they are radical or nominal or liberal, how they walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep is dependent on those traditions, on the standard Islamic narrative. Now, they all believe, every Muslim would believe that Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet, born in Mecca in 570, died in Medina in 632, modeled Islam as a paradigm for the whole world, and received the Quran as his final revelation. Therefore, the Quran is his revelation, sent down between 610 and 632. It is the greatest, the only perfectly preserved revelation according to Islam, the final revelation, and it corrects everything that has gone before. Therefore, Islam, naturally, they would say, is their final religion based on Muhammad's life and saying, that's the Sunnah, and on the Quran's teachings. Conclusion? Well, obviously, they're dependent on 3 things: the book, the man, and the place. And that's what we're going to confront tonight: the book, the man, and the place. The book, the Quran, the man, Muhammad, and the place, Mecca. Since all 3 are foundational to Islam, without one of them, the others 2 fall. We should investigate all 3, and we're going to do that tonight. But in the 7th century, and in the central part of Arabia, the Hijaz, where Mecca and Medina are placed, to do that, we need to start with the sources. Where are we going to go? Where did all these stories come from? Everything we know about Muhammad, everything we know about Mecca, everything we know about the book itself has to come from a source. Now, let's go and look at that source, because this will underline why there's a problem with everything else tonight. Now, to be that, I want you to look at this map. Here's a map of the Middle East, of Arabia. According to the standard Islamic narrative, Muhammad's empire encompassed that brown area. So look at the brown area. That's what existed in Islam up until 632 when he died. Then what they tell us is the Rashidun period came into existence. That's Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. The next 4 caliphs, they encompass that orange area. So there is the expansion moving out. And then you have the Umayyad dynasty, which is the first real big caliphate, according to them. That's the purple area. I don't care too much about the purple area.
Do you see the pattern here? Looking
Yes,
at that
orange
map.
man bad.
The next caliph is actually Donald Trump. He is the caliph. He is next in line. Yeah, we're making Islam great again. Yeah, Orange Man is actually a part of the lineage of Ali, which would be the lineage of Muhammad. So he's actually Shia. That's the reason why he's having a little tit for tat with Benjamin Netanyahu right now. But anyways, do you see the pattern?
Touching that little globe in Saudi Arabia? Okay, just saying.
Oh shoot! Well, there's a contradiction here. Now he's working with the Sunni Wahhabis. Damn. But do you see the pattern?
It's a new 4-year term though.
But do you see the pattern here of how Islam expands?
Yeah, I mean they go and invade and they try to conquer more territory and they maintain their position and stabilize the population and grow, and they continue moving forward like that. That's what they try to do in Europe.
Does that right there, does that compare to something very similar in today's day and age that started with effectively, it started earlier on, but truly started with another man who had some oil ties to a certain crown prince division of a kingdom.
I
He
mean,
began his streak of nation building.
that does sound a little close.
It sounds like statism, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like Bushism. Basically, Islam is a nation building empire. I
It
mean,
is.
as much as Christianity has had its faults, and you had the kingdoms under a guise of an actual religious order, were the European powers when they began to build their empires. Were their empires built more based on a religious order, or were their empires, say Spain, then France, Britain, et cetera, the like, more market oriented, exploiting
I mean,
resources and trade?
they've always had a warrior type of culture to their religion.
Yeah, and so
It's a struggle session. I mean, you see it in the
yes,
Middle East nowadays as a result.
mm-hmm.
They middle managed themselves out of. It's like what would have happened in World War II or World War One if we had not gotten involved. They would have just completely went bankrupt and turned into the Middle East. What we have now, everyone would have been poor,
Mm-hmm.
but there wouldn't have been a winner.
There wouldn't have, no. So we had to choose the winner, and that's socialism.
Corruption is a regular effect of intervention, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Area tonight, I want to look at the brown and the orange area, okay? That's the area I want to look at. So from Tripoli in the west all the way to Afghanistan in the east, from Turkey in the north down to Yemen in the south. Bear with me, let's go to it. Now here's what they say. This is their narrative. This is not my narrative. They say that Muhammad was born in 570. The Qur'an was revealed beginning in 610. He then moves up and goes up from Mecca all the way up to Jerusalem, goes up to the seven heavens, meets Allah, comes down, meets Moses, and finds out that he's to pray 50 times. Moses says, get it down. So he bounces back and forth between the seventh and the fifth heaven and gets it from 50 down to 30, down to 20, down to 10, down to 5 prayers. So that happens in 621. He then moves out of Mecca, moves up to Medina in 622, comes and takes over Mecca and defeats Mecca in 633, and then dies in 632. So that's the life of Muhammad according to their traditions. Once he dies, Abu Bakr takes over for 2 years. He dies peacefully. And then comes Umar, who takes over for 10 years. He does not die peacefully. He is killed. And then, of course, Uthman takes over, and he lasts for about 12 years before he is killed. But while he is there as the caliph, the Quran is finalized. So the Quran, the book we're going to look at tonight, was created. This book that I have in my hands right here is from Uthman. That's what every Muslim will tell you. And then when he is killed, Ali takes over, and he only lasts about 5 years before he is defeated there at the Battle of Siffin by Muawiyah. So, conclusion, Islam was fully formed in the Hijaz by 661. That's what they say. Do you all believe that? We'll say yes for now, okay? In about an hour, you can say no. But for now, let's just say yes. Go with me. Now, here's the question. Everything I've just told you, how in the world and where do you get it from? Well, you would hope that it comes from people that were actually living at that time, right? And from people who are actually living there, right? Eyewitnesses, like we have with Jesus. Matthew, he was an eyewitness. John, he was an eyewitness. You would hope the same thing would work with Islam. Well, let's go and see what we find. In order to know who Muhammad was, everything that happened, everything that I've just showed you, we need to go back to the sources for all these stories. Now, Muhammad dies in 632. The first source we get are what we know is his biography, known as the Sirah. So who wrote the biography? Somebody who knew Muhammad, right? No. The first one they claim who writes it down was Ibn Issa, who died in 765. That's 130 years after Muhammad. Is there a problem there, folks? Okay, you're coming with me. Let's continue. But we don't have Ibn Issa. We have to go to this guy here, Ibn Hisham. He is the one that actually writes down what Ibn Ishaq says, throws out most of it, and only retains what he likes. He dies in 833. After him comes Al-Waqidi, who dies in 835. That's what we know about Muhammad. Nothing from Ibn Ishaq. So let's just get rid of Ibn Ishaq. Whoop, there he goes. But that's not the only thing we have. That's not the only. We have an enormous amount of material on Muhammad, on what he says. This is known as the Hadith. And the sayings, these are the sayings of what Muhammad said. They were first written down by Al-Bukhari. Now look at his date, 870. You thought Ibn Ishaq was bad enough. This is 240 years after the fact. And after him, there's others like Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, you have Tirmidhi, you have Majah, you have Abda, and then you have Nasai. So those are the 6, what they thought authoritative hadith compilations that were put down. But look at, they're all in the 9th and 10th century, right? And then you have 2 more.
Thoughts on this, Andrew?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is what we learned in school, right? Is about how, during King James time, he reformed the Bible and changed it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going off of what I remember being taught in school. I'm not saying it's accurate because that's a long time ago, but that he reformed it so that he could get divorced, right? This is what I was talking about before about the paleo ideas, right? Is that the people come in, step in, and interpret it differently, and it soils it for everybody else.
But in comparison, in contrast, the fact is they're reforming to fit their own narrative doesn't really correspond with what their timeline. It contradicts their timeline between Muhammad's life, his revelations. It doesn't make any sense. Like, regardless of what you believe in Christianity and its foundation, the fact of the matter is we have sort of a timeline of where everything is beginning to be written down and forwards, which is approximately 60, 70 years after Christ's crucifixion and inevitable resurrection and ascension, as my belief, my faith. But Jesus's death in 33 AD goes 60 years. You have you start compiling the written down theses and biography, the Gospels of Christ, his teachings, etc., etc.
Context writing something like that down is very difficult because not everyone is educated at that time.
Exactly, and that's why they say that. And he brings up a point like Matthew, when Matthew and John were disciples, but there are arguments that none of the gospel, when it comes to the Gospels, the namesake of the gospel is effectively according to. So saying that Matthew may have written the gospel probably didn't happen because Matthew may not have been very literate, probably more so than anything. He was probably the most literate of the disciples, considering he was a tax collector. John was not literate, but there was also some revelations, speaking of revelations, that probably helped him as well. So these are inspirations. So there was probably multiple authors, but we can effectively say that the writings to the foundations, and especially with Paul and his writings, his letters, and there's arguments on if he wrote many of his letters as well, although he probably would have been very literate because of his job entail is within the Jewish faith as a Pharisee. But there's a shorter realm of time for when the foundations in writing began to be established. Whereas you're looking at between the death of Muhammad and the beginnings of Islam, you're looking at the biography of Muhammad, the revealings of Muhammad, or the revelations of Muhammad, his sayings, which is also very difficult. Even for 60 years after Jesus, it's difficult to put down what exactly he actually said. but you're trying to articulate this into a 200-year period and even
Shoehorning.
further. So how is that possible? I'm not saying that it isn't. Perhaps inspiration of Allah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not trying to deny them, but I am kind of saying it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Any thoughts?
I understand. Well, like I said, it's shoehorning, right? They're doing their best to just wing it effectively. I mean, that is a substantial period of time to just say, just trust me, bro. This is what he said.
Trust me, bro. Source? Trust me, bro. Let us continue. Thank be to God.
Genre of what we know as a standard Islamic narrative, the tafsir and the tahqiq. The tafsir would be the commentaries which explain the Quran, and then of course the tafsir, which would be the histories of all mankind up until Muhammad. First written down by Al-Tabari. Look at his date. He died in 923. Now I'm putting you their death dates purposely, because everything was written normally within 20 years of their death dates. That's when they would be written. But it could be changed and continue manipulated all right up until they died. Notice, everything I've showed you doesn't even begin to get written down for 200 years. 200 years after Muhammad died, you get the Sirah, then you get the Hadith, another 240 years, and it's not till the 10th century that you even get the Tafsir and the Tahqiq. Abdul Malik's name I'm putting up there because he's the first one to introduce us to anybody called Muhammad. Look, when he introduced that, he introduces it in 692. Muhammad died in 632. You've got 60 years before he's even introduced into the world stage. Does that bother any of you? But the Muhammad we're going to talk about, the Muhammad of Islam, that Muhammad was introduced by these people, the Abbasids. And they do so, they come to power in 749. The Muhammad that we look at is all their invention. And they had 84 years to finally get down his biography, and about 100 years to get down his sayings, and of course, the other two genres. So, Muhammad was revealed 84 years after the Abbasids created him, 141 years after he was first introduced, yet 200 years after he supposedly lived. These are all too late. Now, on top of that, let's take a look at the people that introduced him. Look where they lived. Everything we've been told, they say, happens in Mecca, Medina. That's the Hijaz. That's the central part of Arabia. Those two green circles. Yet, all of the writers of those traditions worked in Baghdad, which is 1,200 miles too far to the north. You have Ibn Hisham, who was born in Basra. He grew up in Cairo, but he did his work in Baghdad. Cairo is over 990 miles from Mecca. Basra is 1,200 miles from Mecca. You have Al-Bukhari, who writes the Hadith. He is from Bukhara, which is Uzbekistan. That's 2,600 miles away. Al-Tabari, who wrote the Tafsir and the Tahqiq, he comes from Tabaristan, northern Iran. That's 1,700 miles away. None of the traditional writers lived or worked in Mecca or Medina. They were all too far to the north of Mecca and came from the west and east of Baghdad. All of these northern areas is where the Abbasids originated from. Are you starting to get the picture? There's a problem here. Everything we know about the man Muhammad, everything we know about the Quran, everything we know about Mecca comes from 200 to 300 years later and hundreds of miles further north. Too late and too far away. Okay, so you say, well, the same happens in Christianity. We've got the same problem. Do we? Let's do the same application. Let's look at our tafsir. Let's look at our hadith. In fact, let's put the same genre that we've just looked at for knowing who the book, the man, the place is, and let's apply it to Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ also has a sirah. That's the biography of Jesus written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Am I correct? He also has a hadith. Those are the sayings by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John when it's written in red letters. Every time Jesus speaks, that's red letters. So we also have the hadith of Jesus. We also have the tafsir. Those would be the commentaries written by Paul. Again, the commentaries of what Jesus was saying and doing, Paul then applied to Ephesus and up to Corinth and to Philippi. So that would be the commentaries. And then we also have the tahqiq, which would be the histories. That's the book of Acts, written by Luke. So you have the exact same four genres in Christianity that they have in Islam. Now let's apply the dates for all of them. And I'm going to take the most liberal dates I can find. I'm going to step on all of your toes. Please don't get mad at me. I'm doing it for a reason. So let's look at, first of all, the Tariq of Jesus. The history of the early church written by Luke between 52 and 62 AD. That's within 20 to 30 years, you already have the Tariq of Jesus written down. When you look at the tafsir of Paul's letters, he was killed in 65 AD. He was writing within 50 years of Christ's death. So within 50 to 34 years, you already have Paul's commentaries, the tafsir written down. As far as the Sirah and the Hadith, the first writer to write them down would be Mark, 70 AD, that's within 37 years. You have Matthew and Luke coming right along, 80 years after, and then finally we end with John, who is the last to write the Sirah and the Hadith of Jesus. That's within 57 years. What that means is that within 29 to 57 years, all of Christ's Hadith, Sirah, Tafsir, and Tariq have been put together. All of the New Testament writers lived in the same place Jesus lived, and they either knew him personally like John and Matthew did, or they got the material from others who saw what he did and heard what he said, like Mark and Luke. You do a comparative between these two. When we compare these two different genres of literature, Christianity knows everything about the book, the man, and the place within 15 to 60 years. Islam has to wait 200 to 300 years. Which do you think is more authoritative? Look at the comparison, folks. Thank God we don't have that problem. As a comparison.
And the applause. Gathering all of that right there, Andrew. What is your general perspective? What is your opinion on all that?
Well, the general consensus seems to be tighter about the context of the situation. So you can be more consistent when you have a more narrow range of time.
That's interesting. So are you comparing on the Christianity versus Islam segment that Christians are a little bit more conservative in how they apply to the beginnings of the church, whereas Islam was a little bit more liberal in how they expanded, considering there's this large gap in between?
Well, yeah,
Because
that's definitely applies. I think another thing that comes to mind is that it's much more mature in its delivery. I guess that can be conservative, but
yeah,
presentation, delivery of the message.
Yeah, presentation is always presentation. It always comes back to the presentation of it. So there is a little bit more maturity. The concept of the fact that Christianity, the early church, for which it was not Christian, and at that point it was still effectively a sect of Judaism before it became Christian. It all begins within one segment or region in the territory of the Near East, and that is the Levant, Jerusalem through up and into what is now Greek lands, and then eventually it makes its way into Europe. It obviously goes west into North Africa, but it's concentrated in one general area, centered piece of where Jesus lived, preached. Whereas Islam, you really don't have that, because it's not centered anywhere of where Muhammad was said to be in and around during the days of his life. But the beginnings of Islam is more towards the north. And we're going to get to that. And he is going to get to that point, because when he gets to the city, in comparison towards Mecca, because most of everything comes out of pretty much the New York City of the Middle East, or of the Near East at the time, Baghdad. Baghdad was a city not like any other. A lot of the trade, the knowledge, it was basically New York City. So still doesn't convert me to Christianity.
Reconvert.
or reconvert. Still doesn't reconvert me to Christianity. We're not trying. We're not trying to convert. Unlike in my opinion of how Islam is in comparison to my Christianity. I am going to be a little bit more liberal on the aspect that I'm not here to convert you or reconvert you to Christianity. I'm open minded enough to where I can say words, but you don't have to listen to my words. Whereas, in my opinion, when it comes to Islam, I, I mean, I don't want to step on any toes, but it's all about conversion. And you can see that through their apostate laws that many Islamic countries actually still have on the books today, especially in, say, Pakistan. If you convert away from Islam, you better get the fuck out of Dodge because you are marked for death. Mm-mm. Couldn't the same be applied to Judaism? It too doesn't convert me. Yes. Same for Buddha. So, I mean, faith, religion, yeah. I mean, it's all about being open-minded, everybody. You got to understand that you're not going to convert everybody. Not everybody's going to see eye to eye with you. We're all individuals here.
It's a
And
fractured
William
religion.
brings and William brings up a great point on Buddhism. Buddhism wasn't supposed to become a religion. It really wasn't, and it never it really it's I still would say it pretty much isn't a religion, but it is because again, politics. Sadly, because religion and its institutions that contrive from those religious attempts end up creating institutions which create hierarchies, which ends up trapping the tribalism of humans as individuals in their nations to uh, have to be forced to take up some sort of mantle, when in reality we shouldn't be doing such. Mm-mm-mm. No worries at all. No worries. So, anything more to say on this before we jump back into it? I'm stopping a
Um,
lot. I told you I
no, you're
was.
fine. No, it's fine. I understand. I just, I guess a reply to William is, you know, I'm not, I'm a deist, so I'm not like, I don't think that any one perspective is absolute. Uh, there's weaknesses and flaws and everything. So,
I'm gonna go with this. I mean, honestly, until I had my issues to end 2023 and to start 2024, I would say that I was kind of on the cusp of being a deist like you, Andrew, but I was also kind of what William was saying, always sometimes never a believer. I didn't know where anything was. Like I didn't have an established concept of anything. I was trapped in this mindset of nihilistic disbelief. Um, but what brought me back was I had my sixth panic attack in 1 week, in literally, and I couldn't calm myself down, and I literally stood outside on my back deck, and I just I finally prayed, like sincerely prayed, um, and that's what brought me back to my Christian faith because I actually was able to calm down. Now I don't know, depends on your perspective. My perspective is that was God intervening and saying, "You can do this. You just need the strength." And I adamantly believe that the Holy Spirit is that energy force that gives us strength in Christ. And I feel still to this day, but I adamantly say that I felt the Holy Spirit come through me. sort of like Pentecost in the Bible, and I mean the apostles were finally given the courage to do what Jesus had asked of them to do, to spread the word, the good news of the gospel. And that's pretty much where I stand today. But yeah, I understand that everybody has their own different perspective of life. We're all not going to agree. And that's where I kind of disagree with Islam, because they don't have that concept. You either convert or you die. Convert me harder is like vote harder. Both political statements. uh I agree. I agree. It is like voting harder.
Middle management.
But I also look at it like this. I believe that the natural state of humanity is anarchy, and that is because there shouldn't be any hierarchy, a man-made hierarchy on this earth. Um, there is only but one king, and that king is not of this world. His kingdom is not of this world, and nothing on earth matters when it comes to the hierarchical structures of kingdoms on this earth. States, kingdoms, what political institutions, religious organizations, doesn't matter. Man cannot subjugate man. The sovereign is God.
Hi, Sean.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Sean. We are going through the destruction of Islam. Mm. You brought that back up. You have anything to say?
Oh,
Oh, that's new. That's new. That's why.
yeah.
We all seem to be connected. Is the connectedness evidence of God or a simulation? Would you like to answer that, Andrew?
Well, I was thinking when I saw that, William, have you seen Stefan Molyneux's video, Evidence for God? He's talking about just it's probably like a half an hour long, and he's just going through, the foundations of why potentially, there is a God and he exists. Even though Stefan, claims to be an atheist, he seems to have a very rigid maturity about trying to be objective on both sides. So I don't know.
Will do. Will do. I believe that it is both an evidence of God and the fact that we are in a simulation. I mean, the perception is reality, so we perceive what we want to perceive, and there is another world beyond this world, and
Yeah.
we are in a simulation until we complete our life and go on to the next other world. So, to a certain extent, yes, I could say we are living in a simulation.
I wasn't
And
trying to, dodge the question. I was just drawing a something to look into. By the way,
I,
I
I,
didn't
I,
want to be misinterpreted in that way. Sorry.
I wouldn't say that you were dodging the question. I will say one thing though. You say you're a deist, right? Um,
Yeah.
Deism believes that that a creator being effectively creates and then walks away and lets humanity kind of just pick up the pieces themselves. Correct?
I mean, walks away is an objective way to put it. Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't even
Effectively,
have to be permanent. It doesn't have to be permanent walk away. It might be just needed a break.
temporary,
Like I said
temporary.
before in one of our last weekly legacy episodes.
Hmm.
I
Whereas
mean,
in Islam, Allah created and then basically said, "I'm going my way, bitches." Mm-mm-mm. So,
sorry, my bad.
but let's dive in. Let's dive back in. We're not finished, guys. We're not finished.
Okay.
We may not get through all of it, but we are not finished. It is fascinating.
If we were to depend on the sources for Jesus compared to what Muslims are dependent on for Muhammad, Jesus would not begin to appear until the 3rd century. How would we defend him? Yet no one's asking the same question of Islam until we are now going to do it tonight. So I'm going to make it one step further. Remember, I just got done telling you that Ibn Hisham wrote the Sirah of Jesus and he died in 833, and that's 200 years after the fact? You heard me say that, right? I lied. We have nothing from Ibn Hisham. Nothing has been written that was written by this man in the 9th century. So where did this book, this is the book you all have to read. If any of you do any study on Muhammad, you have to read The Life of Muhammad written by Alfred Guillaume. This is the standard work that everybody has to go to. Where do you think it comes from? It doesn't come from Ibn Hisham. It comes from this gentleman right here, Heinrich Ferdinand Wüstenfeld, a German scholar, an Arabist living in the 1800s, who for 2 years between 1858 and 1860 went to 4 different German cities, this is in Europe, to different schools and certainly different libraries, and he just started putting together everything he could find on this man named Muhammad. Put it together in that 2-year period and published it in 1860. That is the biography that all of you have to read, because that was taken by Alfred Guillaume, then translated first into French and then into English. Everything we know about Muhammad comes from that German scholar, and it's only 160 years old. The man who Muslims are dependent on to know who their prophet is or what he did is an elderly German linguist who wrote Muhammad's story 160 years ago, thus over.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. A fucking German?
Damn Kraut.
Well, damn. Have a good day,
William.
William. Thank you for joining. Wow.
We're 1,000 years too late. Can you imagine how they're going to defend this? How, if there's any Muslims here, how will you defend your prophet now? Looking how late everything is concerning what he did there in supposedly the 7th century. You can see then the dilemma for scholars today. Their conclusions are Islam as we know it did not exist in the 7th century, but evolved over a period of 200 to 300 years. The Quran probably was not revealed to one man in 22 years, like Muslims tell us, but likely evolved over a period of 50 to 100 years. The conclusion, the history of Islam, at least from the time of the Caliph Abdul Malik, 685 to 705 and before, is a later fabrication. A later fabrication. Now, if that were the case, the problem is, well, what are we going to do? How is it? You can see what their concern is. They said, well, where do we need to go? Well, I would suggest let's go back to the 7th century. Since we can't trust the 9th and 10th century for what Muhammad was doing or what the Quran was in the 9th and 10th century, let's go back to the century Muhammad lived. Let's go back to the century if Mecca existed. And let's go back to the century that book was written. So let's start with Mecca. Why do I want to start with Mecca? You'll see why. Mecca is enormously important. Remember, Islam is dependent on 3 legs. You take out one of the legs, the other 2 collapse. So if you start with the book, the man, and the place for the 3 legs, if you start to confront Mecca, it starts to teeter. Once you shut down Mecca, everything else collapses. Because if there is no Mecca, then it doesn't matter who Muhammad is or what the name is or where you find him, he's not in Mecca. Right? And if he's not in Mecca, then what Muhammad are we talking about? And it doesn't matter what Quran we're looking at, it's not from Mecca. If it's not from Mecca, bingo, then you got a different Quran. So let's shut down Mecca first. Let's begin with Mecca and let's see what we can find. Now this is what they claim. According to the traditions, according to the standard Islamic narrative, Mecca is where Adam and Eve are thrown down to. In chapter 7, verse 24 in the Quran, they're thrown out of the Garden of Eden down to Mecca. So obviously this is the oldest city in history, right? You have to have people to have a city. And there's no one before Adam and Eve. So it's obviously the oldest city in history. It's where Abraham lived according to chapter 21 of the Quran, verse 51 to 71. That's 1900 BC. Therefore, it had to have existed then. Sorry, let's go back. It's also the center of trade, north, south, east, and west. So it should be one of the best known and best documented places in history. Now, it's also, according to the Quran, the center of history. But here's the problem. Open up the Quran and see if you can find that word Mecca in it. You'll only find it one time, in chapter 48, verse 24. So it's not a book, it's not a place that's referred to very often except for once. It's the place of the prophet. So let's look and see what it says about the place of the prophet in the Qur'an. Well, that's the mother of all settlements, according to chapter 6. It's where Adam and Eve were cast to, according to chapter 7. It's where Abraham lived, according to chapter 21. It's where Muhammad was born. And it was also where Mecca became the center of the Qibla, the direction of prayer, according to chapter 2. Now, the above imply people have lived there from the very beginning. Yet the only reference we can find is chapter 48:24. If it's such an important place, why is there only one reference? If you look at the traditions, which are written much later, they're written in the 9th and 10th century, Mecca now does exist. That's not a problem. But take a look at where it places it. Notice what the traditions say. This place of the prophet, which is Mecca, is in a valley and has a parallel valley. It has a stream. It has ruins of a pillar of salt right outside it. It has fields and trees and grass and fruit and clay and loam and olive trees. Folks, that looks like it's pretty verdant. Am I correct? Lots of vegetation, lots of water. Look at Mecca. There's no streams. There's none of these in Mecca, and there never has been. Historically, it's never had water. So obviously,
It's a fucking desert.
whatever the traditions are referring to, it's not the Mecca we know today. When you look and unpack the Quran, you look at it, you will notice that an awful lot of it refers to geographical locations. 65 geographical references, but only 9 places are named. And over again, it refers to these people from Ad. 23 times these people from Ad, that's the biblical Uz. 24 times the people from Thamud, that would be the Nabateans. That's 7 times the people from Midian, they're the Midianites. But take a look on the map and see where they're all placed. They're up in Jordan. Mecca is at the very bottom of the map. Do you see it down there? There's 600 miles. If this prophet were having daily contact with these people from Ad, Thamud, and Midian, he'd have to have a helicopter or a jet to get up and back in 1,200 miles in just one day. They didn't have helicopters back then. Can you see a problem, folks? Obviously, whoever this prophet is who's having this relationship with all these people either had to live up there or this is nothing more than fiction. When we look at the prophets, prophet after prophet, Adam and Eve, Seth, Ishmael, Noah, Hud, Saleh, Queen of Sheba, Daniel, they were all buried in Mecca. Over almost 300 prophets are buried in Mecca. Now, when they're buried in a kneeling position so that they continue to be preserved in that kneeling position. If that were the case, then they still should be there today. Am I correct? So look at all the enormous amount of building that's going on around Mecca. That building that you see there, that tower, is the 4th highest building in the world. When you look at it, you will notice all the buildings around it. You have to have huge foundations in order to build something that high. As they're building these foundations, they should have come across one prophet. They haven't found one, suggesting that none of these prophets were buried there. If the above were true, this would mean that almost all of the Bible would have to be rewritten, as all of our prophets are 600 to 1,000 miles further south. So when is the first reference you can find to Mecca? It comes from the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius Continuato Byzantia Arabica, 741 AD. Muhammad died in 632, if he even lived. That's over 100 years later that we get the first reference of it. What about the maps? Is Mecca on any map? Ptolemy is the best source to go to because he wrote the geography of Arabia, and there are those who've taken his geography and put maps together, like Leinhard Holle in 1400s. Notice when you look at the map, Mecca is not there. Here's another one put together by Laurent Fries in 1541. Notice Mecca is not there as well. Here's another one putting to what Ptolemy said, put together in 1571, put together by Sebastian Munster. Same problem. Mecca just doesn't exist on any of these maps. Here's a 7th century map that has been redacted back to the 7th century. Did you see Mecca on it? I don't. Here's another one, redacted back to the 7th century. Can you find Mecca on any of these maps? Not one. So certainly Ptolemy didn't know about this place. When you look at the Qiblas, these are all the direction of prayers. Now remember, in chapter 2 of the Quran, all the Qiblas were directed to Mecca according to the Quran itself. Dan Gibson, who's done the best work on this, and he has gone through over 100 mosques, and he's gone to all their Qiblas, and notice what he has found. From the 7th century up until the 8th century, up until 706, every Qibla is facing Petra. Not one Qibla is facing Mecca. We're in the 8th century. We still can't find any mosque facing Mecca. It's not till 715 that the first mosque faced Mecca. What does that tell you? For 100 years, they never knew where Mecca was. In fact, look where all these Qiblas are. right there in Medina, in China, in India, in Syria, in Egypt, in Israel, in Jordan, all over the world, and yet none of them seem to know where Mecca was. For over 100 years, they didn't know where Mecca was. Were they that inept? Or did Mecca even exist? Now we come to the trade route theory, and this is where Montgomery Watt has helped out the Muslims. He tried to help them out to show that you can find Mecca if you just look at the trade route. The trade went through Mecca. Now the trade used to go this way, right up through the Persian Gulf, to Basra, across Iraq, across Syria, over into Lebanon. But then you had the Sassanians who started warring against the Byzantines. And for 200 years, from the 5th, 6th, and 7th century, they shut down the Persian Gulf because of these wars. So the trade had to be rerouted. So what Montgomery Watt says is they went from India. And remember, all the trade's coming from China and India. They can't go north because of the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas. So they come across the Arabian Sea. They come to Aden there in the south. And they go zip 1,250 miles up to Gaza in the north. Now notice Mecca's halfway. And so he said Mecca controlled that trade, and that's how Mecca became important. How many of you believe that? No one's going to raise their hands? You know why? Because I'm going to shut it down. But I'm not going to shut it down. Dr. Patricia Corona shut this down. This woman, Danish, read and wrote 15 archaic languages. How many of you could read and write 15 archaic languages? Probably the greatest scholar of her day. She just died a number of years ago. She was my authority. She was the one that helped me when I started my doctorate there in United Kingdom. And she looked at this map and she saw two problems. Let's see if you see the same two problems. This is the first one. She said, hold on a minute. If you're taking all the goods off in Aden and you're going up along what we call the Western Plateau where the oases are, you'd have to go up to Taif. And then from Taif, you have to go down to Mecca, 3,000 feet, and then from Mecca you've got to go back up to Yathrib, and then from Yathrib on up to Tabuk, Khaybar, and then on up to Gaza in the north. Do you see a detour there? Can you see the detour? Let me emphasize exactly why she's saying this. Let's look at this topographical map, and let's just put these cities that are on the trade route. There's Aden, there's Sana, there's Najran, there's Taif, there's Yathrib, Tabuk, Petra, and then on up to Gaza. You notice they're all on the Western Plateau. Are you seeing that? Can you see it from this topographical map? So where's Mecca? Bingo, right there. 3,000 feet down from Taif. Let me give you another map. Here's another one, a topographical line map. There's Aden, there's Sana, there's Najran, there's Taif. Now you can see Yathrib. There's Tabuk, Petra, and Gaza. So where's Mecca? Bingo. Now can you see? It's way off the Western Plateau. It had no water. Why would you go from Taif down 3,000 feet to a city or a place that had no water and no food for your camels, and then come back up 3,000 feet to get up to Yathrib? So that was the first problem. But here's the second problem. She said, why in the world would they even get their material off in Aden and go 1,250 miles by land when they have a waterway on the left? Why wouldn't you just stay on ship? Even today, look how all our goods are sent all over the world. They're sent by ship, are they not? It's the cheapest way to send anything. And you've got the Red Sea there on the left. So why didn't they go on the Red Sea? Now, she's clever because she reads and writes 15 languages. She went back to all the trading documents from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, all the way up to the 7th century, something no Muslim has ever done. And she wrote a book called Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam in 1987 and got death threats because of what she found. This is what she found. She said, when you go and watch the trade, it comes across the Arabian Sea over to Aden. Yeah, it did stop in Aden. They would get provisions there. But it did stop there. They wouldn't take off any goods there. They would go up into the Red Sea. They would go to Agilis, and she found Agilis over and over again. And then from Agilis, went up the Red Sea, on up to Petra, and then from Petra to Gaza, and then from Gaza right across the Mediterranean world. That's what she found. But she didn't go far enough. That was in 1987. We have found something else. See, what she didn't realize is what part of the Red Sea and what side of the Red Sea did they go up? To do that, you need to look at topographical maps from space, and you need to see where the channels are. Do you see the dark blue line there, right in the middle of the Red Sea? There, I'm going to put a red line on it so you can see it even better. That's where the big ships go today. But back in the 7th century, they didn't have big ships. So where did they go? They went where the orange lines are, the golden lines. Those are the channels that the boats use. Notice they're not on the Arabian side, they're on the African side. Am I correct? So, unlike the East Arabian shore, which was arid and dry with no fresh water and thus few people, the West African shore had plenty of fresh water and had larger populations. What's more, the West Coast had easily accessible ports. We know their names. Here they are. The ports along them are Asab, Ajalis, continue on Suakin, Berenice, and Safaga. Look at the dates. They all predate Islam. Notice they're all 1 day's boat ride apart. So they would go in every night to shelter. These have been around since the 3rd century BC. On the Red Sea side, on the Arabian side of the Red Sea, the only port that we know of is called Yanbu, which supported Yathrib. So what about Jeddah, which supports Mecca? Muslims have always asked me, well, then didn't Jeddah exist also? Dr. John Halting, who is the world authority on Jeddah, wrote his book on it. And if you look at his book, he says Jeddah did not exist until the 8th century AD. It was created because Mecca was created. Mecca had no water, therefore it needed provisions. That's why they created Jeddah. Therefore, since there was nothing, let's get rid of Jeddah and Mecca. Boom, they go off the screen. Without Jeddah, without Mecca, what happens to Islam? A big red X. Well then, what about the civilizations? Maybe they knew about this place. So let's ask, and Dr. Patricia Conan went around, she asked this question.
And that's how you destroy Islam. Where the fuck is Mecca? In Africa?
Well, I mean, it's not in Uzbekistan. I hear this very nice in this party this time of year.
That's what I heard. I heard Uzbekistan was very nice this time of year. Is that true, actually?
I don't know. I'm just making it up.
Where is Mecca? It would have to be, because the trade routes for thousands upon thousands of years would guide along Africa. So that would mean that if you were to have a Mecca, it's a desert. It's off of the plateau in a valley where there's no water. Without water, you can't have civilization because you can't have irrigation for your crops, so you can't grow anything. Thus, you can't urbanize because you have no crops, you have no water. The city can't be built. They can now because you can import it. We're in a modern age, but Mecca would have to be on the other side of the Red Sea in Egypt or Ethiopia or Eritrea or wherever, Africa. Or it's further north, and what they perceive as Mecca further south in Arabia is actually Petra, which would actually make a lot more sense because Petra is closer to Jerusalem, and Muhammad did go to Jerusalem.
Allegedly.
In accordance to the Surahs. So, where is Mecca?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Obviously.
I think, so with that being the case, is Islam a fraud? At least,
I mean, he makes a compelling case.
Yeah, at least per where many of their teachings and many of their histories. I'm not saying that Islam is a fraud in their beliefs. You believe what you want to believe, but in the established orient of their actual religious base that extends towards Mecca being key, the foundation, your favorite words, the foundational myths of Islam has been bombarded. They said Mecca is where Adam and Eve were dumped. Yes. I mean, I guess maybe God was after the exile of the garden. Yes. So perhaps if you want to establish that, and this is my perspective, perhaps that was God's punishment for their original sin in the creation story.
Maybe Mecca is hanging out with Lilith.
Possibly Lilith. That's why they were dumped there. Perhaps.
I mean, it is.
But why?
It is in the hot old desert, right?
But why would Abraham, when he left the Sumerian city of Ur, to go to where God wanted to show him the promised land, right, as he moved his family and began the patriarchy. Why would he go further 1,000 or so miles to the south to all desert?
I mean, it's really kind of hard to be consistent with something like that, you know.
That is true. Hell to the Vikings is frozen.
Okay, well, maybe the crowds aren't that bad.
So, but I mean, the desert doesn't have to be hot. So look at Antarctica. It was the most extreme of your worst conditions as life as a human. Hell might be Antarctica. I mean, they say it's below.
Yeah.
Because they lived in. We're possibly debunking all religions at this point. Mark is going off of Viking lore. So Mark is debunking everything with the Vikings, and we're
He's working
debunking
towards a push.
Yeah, he's pushing that the Vikings might have been correct, which who knows? They might be. Yeah.
Not
So
Conscience with Mark Sean Pulse. Check it out on YouTube.
check it out. Not Conscious. It's actually If by Whiskey every Monday night, live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, with Jason of Drop the Mask. It's a combo. The combo effect. Drop the Mask, Not Conscious together. Grab your whiskey, take a shot, listen to some inspiration, some philosophy,
Hallelujah!
some politics. Yeah. So If by Whiskey. So from Vikings with Jason. ISIS. It's all Oh, hold on. It's all pagan. ISIS is or ICE. Yeah. From Vikings with Jason. Amen. So,
What are you gonna do?
fascinating stuff. So, let's dive back into it. Isis is the goddess in Egyptian lore. So, I believe the mother of Horus, which maybe we'll go into and maybe uh, kind of destroy Christianity one time too, which is going to hurt my heart by diving into the Horus structure as well, because there's some Egyptian lineage to the Christian to the biblical references. So perhaps we'll dissect Christianity too. So we're not biased here, everybody. We're not biased. We'll rip apart my own religion as well.
Zach knows the
If
territory.
yeah, so let's do one of those. Total Jesus 1.0. See, Marcus destroying. See, I'm destroying Islam, and Marcus destroying Christianity. We might be going to the cage, the UFC
Oh
cage.
man. Well, I'm waiting for the third coming of Adam.
League of Ordinary Friends, everybody. Another one. That is
our cage.
not
That's where we're gonna go.
that is our cage. But League that is a irregularly scheduled podcast of Drop the Mask, Jason, Not Conscious, Mark, The Legacy Right, me and Andrew, and the formally but hopefully returning soon rebranded Buds in Reality with Sean Collins. Irregularly scheduled roundtable of ordinary friends talking about
Ordinary
basically
friends.
ripping everything of society together. So yes, buds. So let us dive back in because we don't have a whole lot of time left on our hour program, and there is tons to get into with this video.
If Mecca was the oldest city in the history of mankind, someone somewhere should have heard of it. So she went and she looked at all the empires to see what they said. Now remember, she reads and writes 15 languages. So she read everything in its original tongue. The Assyrians, she found nothing about Mecca. The Babylonians, they knew nothing about Mecca. The Roman Empire knew nothing about Mecca. Neither did the Persians. What about those closer to it? Much closer, like the Nabateans. They knew nothing about Mecca. And the Sabaeans knew nothing, and neither did the Himyarites, or the Azdis, or the Kindas, or the Kedarites. None of these people, including the Nubians right across the Red Sea, none of them had heard of Mecca. Not one word. All the way up until the 8th century. What does that say about Mecca to you folks? If it is the center of history, if it's the oldest city in history, if it's where Abraham lived, if all the trade now, north, south, east, west is going through it, why had no one heard of it? Well, what about the other cities that were in that area? Let's ask and see if they are, because there are a lot of cities in that area, or towns, not really cities, they're hamlets. And let's see if history knows about them. Let's look at Najran, which is about 400 miles south of it, a small little town. But Strabo talks about it, Pliny the Elder talks about it, Ptolemy talks about it, Aretas, all of it, it's well known. What about Sana and Taif and Yathrib and Khaybar that are right near Mecca? Yes, they're well known. The Greeks talk about it from the 6th century BC, they refer to these places. Mamre. Pliny has a whole book written on the history of it. Petra, Zukowski has written an entire book on the history of Petra. Maghrib, where Muhammad Mariktan has written another history on it. Why are all these insignificant towns referred to, but none of them, not one of them, referred to Mecca? I'll tell you why. To know why, take a look at a map and you'll see why. Look at those 4 maps. Those are 4 topographical pictures of Arabia. And what do you notice about Mecca and Medina? Well, the central part where Medina and Mecca are is a desert, right? Where there's a desert, there's no water. Where there's no water, there's no food. Where there's no food, there's no people. Where there's no people, there's no towns. Where there's no towns, there's no cities. Where there's no cities, there's no civilization. Where there is no civilization, there is no history. It's as simple as that. How long did it take me to say that? 10 seconds. And you can do the same. You have to have water, folks. If there's no water, there's no history. That's why it was called Patria Deserta by the Romans. It's always been a desert. That's why none of the prophets could have come there. Nobody has ever heard of it. Just like Mars, without water, there's no point even going there. But we have to go there. Let's go to the Hajj. Because the Hajj is where you need to find out. If the Hajj has been there from the very beginning, then it should be also archaic. It should be the center of history. Am I correct? When you go to the Hajj, and those of you who can't go because you're not Muslims, but you go and you circumambulate that square building called the Kaaba 7 times. Why do you circumambulate 7 times going counterclockwise? Good question. I'm going to tell you. To do that, you need to go to Petra. Petra also has a Kaaba that you circumambulate 7 times going counterclockwise. Why does it have a Kaaba? Well, you need to go to this city. Do you recognize it? Jerusalem. You've got to go back to Jerusalem that also have a Kaaba. Remember, Kaaba means square in Arabic. It also means square in Hebrew. And the Kaaba in Hebrew was the Holy of Holies. And the Jews would circumambulate it 7 times going counterclockwise because of Jericho. God told them to do it 7 times going counterclockwise. They still did it as a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Therefore, the Kaaba that was in Mecca comes from Jerusalem. It gets better than that. After they circumambulate 7 times, they then run back and forth between Safa and Marwa, the 2 mountains that are there. Take a look. Do those look like mountains to you? They're only about 20 feet high. You can climb on them as kids. Those are not mountains. Those are rocks. They're called Marwa and Safa, and the Muslims run back and forth 7 times. Why? Because Hagar is in the desert. She's thrown out of Mecca by Abraham, who's living in Mecca. She runs out of water. She needs to find water for Ishmael. She runs back and forth 7 times between 2 mountains. Folks, those don't look like mountains to me. In fact, hold on a minute. They're only 100 feet away from the Kaaba, which is in the center of Mecca. If she's out in the desert and she can't find water, then what is she only doing 100 feet away? Why don't she just knock on any door and get some water from the neighbors? Can you see there's a problem here, folks? This is not the original Marwa and the original Safa. This is nothing more than a facsimile. This is nothing more than when you go to Las Vegas, you'll see an Eiffel Tower there, right? That's not the original Eiffel Tower. You'll see a pyramid there. That's not the original pyramid. They're nothing more than facsimiles. That's what you're looking at. So where is the original Marwa and Safa? No, some people think it's in Petra. You need to go to Jerusalem. Go to Mount Moriah, where the Temple Mount is. What is the name for Moriah in Arabic? Marwa. You go down to the Kidron Valley and go back up to Mount Scopus. That's what the pilgrims all did. And what is the name of Mount Scopus in Arabic? Safa. So the original Marwa, the original Safa are in Jerusalem. God bless the Muslims. All they did was plagiarize. Everything is plagiarized in Islam. When you look at the Hajj, you can see that the Kaaba is plagiarized. You can see that the Safa and Marwa are plagiarized. You can see that the Hill of Arafat, I don't have time to get into it, that's plagiarized. You can see the Jamarats where they throw 49 stones. Why 49? Because it's a multiplication of 7, which is the holy number in Judaism. They've just plagiarized from the Christians. You look at the Zamzam well, that is the same thing, the same word that is used for the well there in Siloam. the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem. And then we get to the black stone. Thank God this is not plagiarized. What in the world is the black stone doing there? On the eastern corner of the Kaaba. Every Muslim, as they're circumambulate, they kiss the stone so that they get their sins forgiven. Who can forgive sins but God? This is idolatry, folks. And it's at the very seat of Islam. The very center of Islam is based on idolatry. If Muslims say God is one, then what's that stone doing there? That does not come from Jerusalem. To understand that, I'm not going to go into it because I see I'm running out of time. I need to keep going. Look and go up on Fander Films. We've got all of it up there. We're now unpacking all of this material so you can see it. So can you see? No one could find Mecca placed in the Qur'an. Crone pretty much debunked the trade route theory. Gibson debunked the Qiblas. Crone also debunked, she not only debunked that, but she also debunked the maps. And then we...
Idolatry? Plagiarism?
Debunk Islam.
Debunk Islam? They have their own banks, though. That's the reason why we're in the Middle East, to put Rothschild banks in place.
Well, I mean, we took away the money from Russia when we fought the war in Ukraine, so why can't we? I'm just being facetious.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I mean, he makes a good point.
Well, I mean, Safa and what is it, Mara? I don't speak Arabic. I don't speak Italian, everybody. That's the joke. Mount Moriah and Mount Moriah and Mount Scopus. Yeah. They're basically talking about Jerusalem. Petrodollar rules. Yes. Petra dollars rule. Perhaps Mecca, if exists, they're getting it twisted, and they have discrepancies because they really want it to be in Arabia. They want their holiest of holies to be centered in Arabia, but perhaps they get misconstrued because perhaps they are Christians. Perhaps they're heretics.
Copycats.
They're heretics to the early church, as the early Christian church was being founded and established. Perhaps it was their way to compete. And there was a heresy. And actually, I would say go look and study a little bit of St. John of Damascus, because he concludes that Islam in itself could potentially be Arianism, which denies the divinity of Christ, etc., etc. But perhaps Islam is actually a competitive opposition towards the early foundations of the church, known as the heresy of Arianism.
That's potentially, you look at throughout history, and there's always, different forks earlier that claim that they're the original, creators of the idea or whatever, and then they present themselves as authentic, when really it's just a way for them to make money.
Yeah, I mean, you have a Greek-oriented style of church, because the Paul trekked through Greek lands and into Roman land throughout the empire. He preached and spread the ministry of Christ throughout the eastern end of the empire until it kind of met in Rome and Italy, right? So you have the Paul sector of the church, effectively out of Antioch. You do have the Gnostics, the Gnostic mystics. You have Arianism. You have all these different sheds, because nobody necessarily knew where to formulate. The early Christians were very decentralized. So, yeah, so they had to kind of kind of center on. I just saw Mark's petrodollar. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But perhaps that's where Islam branches off of. Because remember, it does form the beginnings of it takes into effect their belief that Muhammad's revelations are in the 7th century, in the early mid 7th century. And what is also coming of itself within the 2 years of the fall of Rome. And earlier than that, with the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, and Constantine making Christianity an official organized structure of religion. Well, he didn't. He organized it. It wouldn't be until what was the emperor's name after? Yeah, he arranged it. The emperor after him made it the official. I forget his name.
Yeah.
But it's starting to kind of make sense in my mind that perhaps we do have a fork from the early church after the arrangement of the organizational structures to the foundation of what the church is today, or what it's supposed to be today.
I mean, it's a compelling argument.
Mm-hmm. One thing though is Arianism from the north, from Ireland. It is from Ireland. It was previously named Ariland. I don't know this stuff. Really interesting. Arianism comes from the heretical bishop at the time named Aries. And effectively, I don't know much about Arianism, honestly. Um, yeah, I'm not sure if it came from the north or anything, or Ireland. I'd have to look further more into it, but it gets its name from the bishop Aries, hence Arianism. And one of its most established principles is the context that Jesus was just a man. There is no divinity, there is no divine lineage to Jesus. He was effectively just another prophet, probably the best and more perfect of the prophets, but just a man nonetheless. And that also goes into what the Gnostics also believed. They did not believe in the divinity of Christ either. So, but yeah, I don't know much about Arianism. I kind of want to learn it because I really do think it's fascinating. The old heresies that the church refers to as heresies. So the language crossover, always curious why something is named, makes sense, named after Aries. And that's Aries, the bishop, not Ares, the god of war in Greek mythos. Although very interesting, Ares, good god of war, or Mars in Roman context, the god of war. I believe it's Mars, right? Mars Ares connection. So Romans called it Mars. That's how you get the planet Mars, and the Greeks, the Greek context.
And
yep. Mm-hmm. So the constellation Aries, which Mars is in, right? When we look into the sky, I think that's how you get the Mars connection with Aries. So, yes, Bishop Aries. I wasn't sure of the spelling. I'm not honestly I'm not sure what the spelling is too. But Arianism is pretty interesting. So, any context of this? Did we break Islam?
Well, not breaking
this
an arrow. So,
or this guy. This guy, I should.
This guy is definitely breaking Islam. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Muslims. God bless all of you. Oh, Arius. That Mark found the spelling for us. So let us continue.
We got ourselves a worker there, don't we?
We do. We got ourselves a worker. Let's continue and wrap up, actually, because like I said, we're probably not going to get through the whole video.
Debunked the trade route going through the Red Sea, and then, of course, the 5 stages of the Hajj. Though Mecca has existed since Adam and Eve in Surah chapter 7, verse 24, there is no evidence of it anywhere until 741. And everything we now find in Mecca, we could find previously in Petra, and now even earlier in Jerusalem. You ready for Muhammad? What do we know about Muhammad? Well, last and greatest prophet according to Islam, modeled Islam for the world, received the Qur'an, has a final revelation. Everything we know about him we can find in the Sirah of Ibn Hisham, but as I now said, it looks like that comes from a German scholar named Wustenfeld. And the Hadith of Bukhari, we don't have anything from al-Bukhari until the 11th century. And the 8 of his 9 volumes don't appear till the 16th century. The same problem we're having with the Quran. We'll get to that in just a bit. Now, is he referred to in the 7th century in the time period he supposed lives? If he did exist, someone should have known about him, right? Or said something about him. So what we need to do, let's start with the coins. Because the coins, if there's any caliph coming to power, the first thing a caliph will do, or a king will do, will mint coins with his name on it, his image on it, and also what denomination he belongs to, what religion he belongs to, and the date of the coin, right? That's what they all do in those ancient days, because they didn't have newspapers, they didn't have TV, they didn't have radio. They knew that everybody would touch coins. So let's see where the mints are. According to Islam, everything that the caliphs did was in Medina, which is in the south there in Hijaz. But when you look at the mints, notice where all the mints are. The mints are all up there in Syria, Jordan, and Israel today. Those are the western mints. What about the ones in the east? They're all in what is today Iran and Iraq. There are no mints whatsoever where they're supposed to be. All the coins were minted too far north. Did I not say that earlier, too far north? What's interesting is, when you look at the coins themselves, the conclusion is none of these mints were in the Hijaz, and instead they were too far north, possibly because the Hijaz was a desert with no water, and where there is no water, you know the rest of the story. Let's then look at the coins, because the coins were being minted by people who were living at that time, and they were leaders. Notice that when you look at the mints, look at the coins from the 7th century, 620, 630, 640, 650, up until 661, you notice that almost all the coins are Christian. Look at the crosses on them. That's what you do. You put the cross in if you're a Christian. We can't find any coins whatsoever in the early 7th century that has anything to do with Islam, anything to do with Muhammad, anything to do with the Quran, or anything to do with Mecca. Not at all. So when we get to Mu'awiyah, who is the first caliph according to the Islam from the Umayyad dynasty, Mu'awiyah, the first caliph, look at his coins. He's supposed to be a good Muslim, right? But take a look. What does he have above his head? A cross. Take a look at the two that are on the right there. Look at the two bottom ones there. There's Mu'awiyah. He has a cross above his head. He's holding a cross in his hand. On the back side of the coin is the word Muhammad, which is Muhammad. That's the first reference to Muhammad anywhere, and that's 663. Possibly, is he Muhammad? No. What does Muhammad mean in Arabic? The praised one. So who's the praised one? Well, if he's holding a cross and he's got a cross, who do you think the praised one is? What's his name? Jesus. Thank you. Let's prove that. So let's go to an inscription that Mu'awiyah put that. This is an inscription by Mu'awiyah. There's his name. And he refers to himself as the servant of God, commander of the believers. And what does he have right there in the top left? A cross. So who is he a servant of God for? And what believers? Christians. He was a Christian, folks. All the coins say so. They don't lie. This is the 7th century. He rules up until 680, and then you have Abd al-Malik come to power in 685. Abd al-Malik is the one that we need to look at, because he introduces new coins that introduce the Shahada. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is only one God but God. Muhammad is nothing more than the servant of God. But remember, Muhammad is a title. It means the praised one, right? So what does he do? Because of he puts that up there, Justinian II goes to war with him. He's the Byzantine emperor. Abd al-Malik wins the battle, and he puts up this coin with himself as victorious. I didn't know you could put up images of yourself on your coins. Not if you're a Muslim. So obviously he's not a Muslim. Obviously this Muhammad that's there has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with Jesus. Why? Just look at the Dome of the Rock that he built. Look at the inscriptions on the Dome of the Rock that he built in 691. When you look at the inscriptions, you will see they're all attacking the divinity of Jesus, his Christology, the Trinity, and his sonship. All of these inscriptions, say not three, for God is one and he has no son. For truly, God does not beget, nor is he begotten. One is in chapter 4, verse 171 of the Quran. The other is in chapter 112. These are all attacking Jesus Christ. And then you get, for truly, there is only one God but God. And the praised one, so who's the praised one? It's all about Jesus, right? So the praised one is nothing more than the messenger of God. He was an anti-Trinitarian Christian, attacking the Byzantine Christianity. Why? Because they're his greatest threat as the other superpower of his day. He then introduces this coin. This is my coin. I bought it now. And all of it is attacking Jesus Christ. Folks, this is the beginning of what later became Islam. All started by this man, and it was all to confront Jesus Christ. It's all against our Lord. The coins don't lie. If you want to go to the inscriptions that find the exact same thing. They're found in the north, they're found in the south. None of them are found in the middle. Why do you think they're not found in the middle? There's no water. There you go. Boy, you learn fast. Ilka Lindstad is the one who dated he was the one that looked at the rock in the inscriptions, and he looked at the 100-year period between 640 and 740, and he noticed that all these inscriptions, which are written in Arabic, they do have formula, but it's nothing to do with Islam. It's pious formula, which has much more to do with Christianity. It's not till 690 to 710 that the Prophet Muhammad is introduced into these inscriptions. Muslim rites such as pilgrimages, prayers, and fasts are introduced about 720, and Muhammad as a man and the people called Muslims and the religion called Islam are not introduced until 730. That's over 100 years after Muhammad, if Muhammad even existed. It was only in the 730s onwards that there is evidence of popular devotion to a man named Muhammad as a prophet and messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions incredibly awkward. There is a 100-year silence prior to this that indicates that Islam did not exist as a distinct religion until long after the time of Muhammad, which cast doubt on whether he had any part in starting Islam. I'm going to go through these real quickly. I just want to show you, what about the references to Muhammad in the 7th century? There are major references. There are 4 of them. Only the 4 references. Take a look at every one of these references to Muhammad in outside sources. Take a look. He is known as the Tayyaye de Muhammad. Muhammad the Tayyaye. Who are the Tayyaye? They were Lockmans. They lived in Iraq. So obviously the praised one is from Iraq. Look where Iraq is on a map. It's over 600 to 1,000 miles further north. What about in 636, the Arabs of Muhammad, which is in Yarmouk. Where is Yarmouk? It's north of Israel. So obviously this is way too far north. Muhammad never went to Israel. I don't remember him ever being to Iraq. 660, Sabaeus talks about the Ishmaelite called Mahmed, who was aligned with 12,000 Israelites. First of all, that's not historical. There were no 12,000 Israelites who were going to war against the Byzantines. That never existed. So obviously, this is fraudulent. But nonetheless, look and see where this is. This is way up in Damascus. So that Muhammad, I don't recall Muhammad ever being that far north. And then you have John Bar Ben-Kaya in 690 talking about a teacher and leader of the Arabs who obviously was named Muhammad. Who is this referring to? Look and see who the Arabs were. They were all Christians, but they were not Trinitarian Christians at this time. It's really John of Damascus who really identifies and sees for the first time the Muhammad we're starting to come across. And he does refer to it, talks about Muhammad, who comes with his ludicrous doctrines, comes with 4 books. The book called The Cow, which is now Surah 2, the book called Women, which is Surah 4, the book called The Table, which is Surah 5, and the book called The Camel, which is Surah Nothing. There is no camel surah in the Qur'an. So obviously, whatever John Damascus is, it's not the Quran we know today. And the Quran is much bigger than just 3 surahs. There's 114 of them in the Quran. So obviously, this means that there was no Quran that early. Every reference to Muhammad in the 7th century places him in Gaza, Jerusalem, Damascus, or Hira, which are all situated too far north and probably refer to another Muhammad, the praised one. Now we get to the Quran, and this is where it really gets really delicious. This is the best material, folks. Sit back. If you want to go to the toilet, you can do, but you'll miss everything. So let's go ahead. What do the Muslims claim about the Quran? Number 1, it's uncreated. It's right there in the Quran itself in chapter 85, verse 22. Therefore, it has never been had any chance that any human could have any control over it. It was sent down to Muhammad between 610 and 632. That's what they claim. It was completed by Uthman in 652. That's why this book in my hand right here is from Uthman, they say. And then number 4, the Quran is unchanged in the last 1,400 years. Not one word, not one letter has changed. Have you heard Muslims say this? Every Muslim says those 4 things. Just memorize those 4 words. Uncreated, sent down, completed, unchanged. That's all you need to know. I'll come back to it. I'm going to shut down those 4, but I'm going to show you something even better about those 4. Hold on. So what do Christians claim about the Bible? Is the Bible uncreated? No, of course it's created. We know who wrote it. We even know the authors. We put their names on most of the books. The Bible was not sent down. It was inspired by God, but not sent down through an angel. Bible was complete, so yes, we would say that was the case. The thing is, we don't have any of the original manuscripts, so we don't know what the complete is. Has it been changed? Yeah, parts of it has. We know where they've been changed. We know even what we even put. We're very transparent. We put in right where the verses that have been added or there have been scribal errors have been taken away. So we know that. We're very clear about that. And we're only talking about 40 verses out of over 6,000 verses. So tonight, I'm not going to shut down uncreated or sent down because I'm not there. I'm going to shut down complete and unchanged, those two. That's what I want to look at. So what I want to look for is one Qur'an manuscript from the 7th century that's complete, 114 surahs, that is unchanged. And this is what I've asked Muslims all over the world. I've debated over 100 debates that I've done with Muslims, and this is what I always ask. Show me one manuscript of your Qur'an from the 7th century that's unchanged, just like the Qur'an I have in my hand here. Where do we go to find out about the Qur'an? We have to go to Sahih Bukhari. Remember I told him that he died in 870, so he's the one that tells us how the Qur'an was put together. Now this is what he says. He says, Muhammad died in 632, it had not been written down. It finally got written down in its final form at the time of Uthman in 652, the third caliph. He then sent 5 copies to 5 different cities, Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. And those then became the canonized Qur'an for the whole world. In 652. The problem is almost immediately another Qur'an supplants the one in Damascus written by Ubay ibn Ka'b. It had 116 surahs. That's 2 more than are in the Qur'an today. Another was written in Baghdad, written by Ibn Masud. It had 110 surahs. That's a 4 less than what is in the Qur'an today. Another was written by Ibn Musa, 114 surahs. It had so many differences. According to Arthur Jeffrey, who's done the work on this, if you just look at those manuscripts and you compare it with the Qur'an today, there are about 15,000 differences. You've got a problem. So how could there have been one Qur'an? There were at least 5 Qur'ans from the 7th century from Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We cannot find one of them. Now, one of those Qur'ans exists today. Folks, we're only talking about 1,400 years ago. As Christians, we have the Sinaiticus, the Alexandrinus, we have the Vaticanus. These are from the 3rd and 4th century. That's 200 to 300 years before the Quran. Why can we reproduce our entire Bible? We have 365 manuscripts of the New Testament before the 7th century. Why can't they come up with one Quran from the 7th century? That's my question. They are the ones that claim it, not me. Where are these 5 manuscripts? Look at those cities. They've always been controlled by Islam for the last 1,400 years. So how could they have lost it? Rather inept, wouldn't you say?
How can they have lost it?
That's a good question. I mean, you think that you want to keep a written record? I mean, I know I've seen stuff like on YouTube about Jesus, about how the historians kept records about the time at the time when he was alive, and shortly after he passed away, and how everyone was basically losing their minds about his message.
Well,
So
we also have 2. We
and
also
that's
have
coming
2.
from
No, go ahead.
that's coming from a fairly liberal, moderate YouTube content creator. Today I found out. So
hmm And to be fair, like the two most known historians that give us an account of Jesus, Tacitus and Josephus, they were not biblical, but yet we can take accounts non-biblical from historical accounts from them. And I know Josephus was born about 4 years after the death of Christ, but he was an investigator, so he was able to correspond through his writings and his research of accounts throughout the entirety. I mean, it's great to be a Roman citizen. Right during the empire years, he was able to correspond accounts from Roman from Roman correspondence as well as Jewish accounts as well. So, and then you have the writings, the manuscripts of the New Testament, but yet we can't seem to find any sort of manuscript of the Quran.
I mean, it's kind of a weak foundation there for if you want to be consistent in an argument. But I mean, I'm not Muslim. This isn't my area of expertise. So I'm just saying it from an outside observer looking in, it is very flawed. Trying to be consistent.
Yes, and the idea around who Muhammad is, um, where he came from. You don't know. You can't really pull from anything of if Muhammad existed or whom Muhammad was. And I do like the aspect that he presents that Muhammad is more of a title. What do you say? The praised one? Is that what Muhammad
Yeah,
means in Arabic? The
yeah.
praised one? Well,
Translate.
who? And he brings this up. Who is but the praised one when it comes to Christianity?
Well, it's the King of Kings. It's Jesus Christ.
It's Jesus. So, could Islam attaching to the Arianism that we actually kind of touch base on? Yes, 30 about 20 to 30 years. The
After
biographies or the gospel weren't came a little later than that, but about 20 to 25 years before that. And if you go to the beginning part of our episode today, watching the little lecture that we're watching, he presents that in his timeline. Acts was effectively the first book that was established for the New Testament, in which acts as the history of the church effectively and how it expands. So the history of the church comes before the biographies of Jesus, but the Gospels in themselves, starting with Mark. Mark is considered to be the first of the canonized Gospels, about give or take about 40 years. I think Mark was about 40 years, and then so on and so forth. I think John was about 50 or 60 years after. So, but yeah, it kind of does make you wonder. Perhaps this is a Christian sect gone astray to formalize their own idea and their own identity away from the divinity of Christ and the Trinitarian beliefs of what the church established itself on when it canonized in the 4th century under the Emperor Constantine and the Council of Nicaea.
well, historically, Islam has been pretty violent. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a way to, like, maybe somebody thought up a way to reform the society by mixing in uh, and implementing different early Christian ideas and trying to fork it that way, and in order to
Possible.
better tame the society that they found themselves in.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly. Especially when you're desolate down in the deserts of Arabia, more north than south because that's more of a desert, but it's all about survival there. So why not establish something that piques the interests of peace and but understand the realities of where you live and attempt to tame the realities with that of the religious teachings of Christianity. So for perspective, all religions are wrong to those who don't believe in them. Politics, my man. Everything gets political. All religions are wrong. If you have to, we have to break our psyche away from religion and start focusing on what is personal to us, faith. Because if Islam is what we are effectively kind of breaking, it sounds like it might actually be Arianism versus the traditional church, and that kind of places more perspective in why the Crusades were fought. Maybe we need to look further into exactly why the Crusades were fought.
I think I got a book on that actually. Find it. Yeah, here it is. Actually, I found this because of Assassin's Creed, the Templars and the Assassins. This is, I mean, hey,
Nice.
This is what the original game was supposed to be.
Yes.
The part of the
Yes.
foundation was from this book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The Hashashons.
The Secret Order of the Assassins as well. That's another
Mhm.
book that it was based off of.
The Assassins were a real order.
Yeah,
And obviously we do know what the Knights Templar are. So
I've got
which-
a lot of books on a lot of different
Mhm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
It
So
is a good game.
yeah, it is a very good game, and the early games really do kind of push into the realities of history and kind of make you think and ponder. The later games, they're just money making scheme. We're successful, so we're gonna make sure that
We
we're,
get
we're
copyright
gonna
struck for mentioning it.
probably. Damn you, Ubisoft! Damn you! So, but to close out, because we've gone well beyond 2 hours. I told you we probably weren't going to get to the entirety of the video. I implore you to go check that video out. I will link it in the description. I don't have it in the description right now, but I will link it into the description for you to click into. I think it's fascinating, and it makes you want to go down more rabbit holes and go down the rabbit holes of YouTube, Rumble, Britannica, etc., and so forth, and try to seed the knowledge, because that's all this is. It's just seeding the
We're
knowledge
learning, right?
for you to.
We're all students.
Yep, and that's exactly what it is. That's what the purpose of life is, in my opinion. We are here to learn. And that's the reason why, if you take the creation story serious, even in the serious standards of parable, the seriousness of the betrayal in Eden, the original sin, is that we are to continue to learn, not to actually hold on to all of the knowledge, because knowledge corrupts. Corruption is absolute. So, I mean, we don't have the authority and the power that God has, but we can still learn. We're allowed to learn. We're just never going to know the truth until the end. And I think that is
Every answer comes 2 more questions.
exactly. Whenever you ask a question, it's just like what you said. You get an answer in 2 more questions. So then you ask the next question and you get 4 more questions. So what is the answer? The answer is you may never know. So it's continue to learn and they continue to articulate. So with that, Andrew, I think we should close out. We are 7 minutes over 2 hours. Thank you all. I see that there's 43 of you that have tuned in live. Thank you, every one of you. Thank you, Mark, for jumping into the chat. And thank you, William, when you were on, jumping into the chat. Thanks, everybody, for, I mean, if you ever want to join while we're live, jump into the chat, Rumble, X, YouTube, and say your piece. Other than that, if you don't want to, but you still want to say your piece, leave a comment afterwards on Rumble or YouTube. But I'm glad that y'all, all 43 of you that stayed tuned live of 2 dweebs, thinking that there's something.
What are you, crazy?
Yeah, you crazy for staying with us. We love you. Thank you. So like, share, subscribe if you can, and any other words to end there, Andrew?
Like I said earlier, maybe we'll look into Lacanian psychology and move from there. I don't know. We'll just kind of play it out and see what happens. So,
and while you're at it, look into Ludwig von Mises's ideas around praxeology, because I think psychology and praxeology and economics can teach you the history of the world for the most part, and why we have these religious these heretical, hierarchical, man-made religious structures that are just forged on authority and power, because it's bullshit. Think for yourselves. Keep learning.
Right.
That's why God puts you on this planet. I see a bald spot.
Yeah, I know. I was trying. I thought I had another Lacanian
Thank
book
you,
here,
Mark.
but I was trying to remember where it was. I'll find it later. I'll throw it up here.
Your bald spot actually makes me think that you should just go become a monk. You have the baldness. It's pretty centered too. You know, the old friars from Robin Hood. You know, Friar Took.
I'm in competition with Tom Woods.
Oh, you're in competition with Tom Woods.
Top bald head.
I think you're winning, dude. I respect you more than Tom Woods.
Tom Woods' house?
Yeah, well, let's burn it to the ground. He's got some issues, some serious issues. Still love Tom Woods, but still, he's got some serious issues. Anyways.
Talking about the Jack B. Lloyd song, but okay.
Oh, I know. Terrible. Hilarious. But they're awesome. Terrible, but so awesome, actually, at the same time. And that is where libertarianism forked. Just like Christianity with Islam. So,
Breach of trust. Here we go.
Have a great weekend. This drops all over the podcast sphere, so share that amongst your friends and your family, and let's just build a streak of knowledge, everybody. I am the legacy of Jennifer Kaiser. That's Andrew Joseph, my man. Bald, the great bald head, as it says in the Old Testament.
Go on, bald head.
Live long. We're on wrong screens, man. Live long and prosper. Have a great weekend, everybody.
They sent a bear, and he destroyed them. Bye, guys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pete Okerlund, and I'd like to welcome you to WCW Nitro.
You know, brother, you think you know what it takes to beat Hollywood Hogan, who wants to climb in the ring and try out the largest arms in the world. Oh, son.
You want to wrestle an inch more Ric Flair, you gotta be able to walk that out and style and profile. Woo! You really think you're ready for the You really think you're ready for the Scorpion Deathlock? You think you're ready for a fatal encounter?
This is why they call me the total package. If you have a pain threshold to withstand the butcher rack, let's find out.
Hallo, hier ist Alex Wright. Wenn ihr High-Flying Wrestling Action wollt, Spinning Sidekick, Top Turnbuckle Dropkick, dann nehmt mich. Der Sieg ist euch sicher. Versprecht euch.
Oh yeah! Watch the flying elbow drop off the top rope. Not only beat people 1, 2, 3, but I hurt him real bad.
It only takes one of 1,000 holds. You think you're man enough for the challenge?
You better be ready to wrestle, because you know, when you get in the ring with Eddie Guerrero, it's going to be high-flying and exciting.
Hey, anytime you feel froggy, man, I'll slap on the buzz killer, rip your shoulder right out of socket, Wolfpack style. Hey, funky boy. Like there's a choice here? Good God! Pick the man with the plan. Pick DDP. Hey, all you suckers out there, you wanna play the game? You wanna play with the big boy? Put your feet on the button, cause when you go down 110th Street, it's gonna be on like neck bone, sucker.
This is Booker T from Harlem Heat, hardcore OG brother from 110th Street. The minute you punks got the guts to step up to the plate, push the button.
Yo, Chico, you selected Scott Hall?
Get ready for a wild ride on the outside. Hey there! How'd you like to get power bomb? Come on, take me. I'm begging you, take me. Please take me. You think you got the courage to step in the ring? I think you're gonna wind up with a snap neck with a choke slam.
Technical wrestler, high flyer, brawler. It don't matter what you consider yourself to be. When you're in the ring with the crippler, you're a loser.